The mail-order bride's fingers had gone numb an hour ago. And now Felicity Kramer could no longer feel her feet inside her thin leather boots as the stagecoach driver's body lay frozen beside the overturned coach, his neck broken in the accident that had left her stranded on this desolate Nebraska road in the middle of a January blizzard. She had been traveling to Wood River to marry a cattle rancher named Herbert Thompson, a man she had never met but who had seemed kind enough in his letters, promising her a warm home and security in exchange for companionship and help running his household. Felicity had left Boston 3 weeks ago with hope in her heart, and her mother's wedding ring sewn into the hem of her dress, ready to start fresh after the factory where she had worked for 6 years closed its doors. At 23 years old, she had few prospects back east, and the idea of the wide open Western territories had appealed to her sense of adventure, even if the practical matter of survival had driven her decision more than romance. Now she wondered if she would even survive to meet her intended husband. The wind cut through her wool coat like it was made of paper, and the snow fell so thick she could barely see 10 feet ahead. She had tried to walk, following the road as best she could, but the drifts came up to her knees in places, and exhaustion was setting in. Her carpetbag felt like it weighed 100 pounds, though it contained only her spare dress, some undergarments, a few books, and the small daguerreotype of her parents, who had both succumbed to influenza 2 winters past. The sun was starting to sink lower in the sky, what little of it she could see through the storm, and Felicity knew that nightfall would bring temperatures that would kill her as surely as a bullet. She pushed forward anyway, because stopping meant dying, and she had not come all this way to freeze to death within perhaps a day's journey of her destination. Her vision was starting to blur when she heard it, the sound of hoofbeats muffled by snow but unmistakable. She tried to call out, but her voice came as barely a whisper, her lips too cold to form words properly. She stumbled forward, waving one arm, and then her legs gave out entirely and she collapsed into a snowdrift, the white coldness swallowing her. Strong hands pulled her up, and through her dimming vision she saw a man's face, weathered and concerned with ice forming in his dark beard. His eyes were a striking gray blue, like a winter sky, and they widened with alarm as he took in her condition. "Good Lord, madam, you will freeze to death out here," he said, his voice rough but urgent. "Can you stand?" Felicity tried to answer, but her teeth were chattering too violently. The man did not wait for a response. He scooped her up as easily as if she weighed nothing and carried her toward a large chestnut horse that stood patiently in the storm. The animal was magnificent, probably 16 hands high, with a thick winter coat and intelligent dark eyes. The cowboy set Felicity on her feet for just a moment, keeping one arm around her waist to hold her upright, while he pulled a heavy wool blanket from his saddlebag and wrapped it around her shoulders over her inadequate coat. Then he took off his own sheepskin jacket, still warm from his body, and draped it over her as well. "No," Felicity managed to protest through her chattering teeth. "You will freeze." "I've got more layers than you, and I know this cold," he said firmly. "Now I am going to put you on Rusty here. He is the steadiest horse in 3 counties, and he will keep you safe." "But what about you?" Felicity asked, finding her voice a little stronger now that she was bundled in the blanket and coat, both of which smelled of leather and wood smoke and something indefinably masculine. "I will walk alongside," the cowboy said, and before she could protest further, he lifted her onto the saddle. The horse's warmth seeped through her frozen legs immediately, and she could have wept with relief. The cowboy secured her carpetbag to the saddle, then took the reins and began leading the horse down the road, walking through the deep snow without complaint. "What is your name?" Felicity called down to him, her voice still shaky but clearer now. "Wade Jackson, madam," he said, not breaking his stride. "I have got a ranch about 5 miles up this road. We will have you warm and fed before full dark if we keep a steady pace." "I am Felicity Kramer," she said. "I was on my way to Wood River when the stagecoach overturned." The driver, he did not survive. Wade's expression darkened with sorrow. "That would be old Pete Hutchins. He has driven this route for 15 years. Damned shame, pardon my language. This storm came up sudden, worse than the weather watchers predicted. You are lucky I decided to head into town today to pick up supplies. Almost stayed home on account of the snow." "I would be dead if you had," Felicity said quietly. "I could not feel my hands or feet anymore. I was starting to think about just lying down in the snow." Wade glanced up at her sharply. "Do not ever do that. You fight until you cannot fight anymore, you hear me? There is always a chance as long as you keep moving." His vehemence surprised her, but she nodded. "I will remember that." They continued in silence for a while, the only sounds the crunch of snow under the horses' hooves and Wade's boots, and the howl of the wind. Felicity studied the man walking beside the horse, leading her to safety while he himself trudged through the storm. He was tall and lean, built like a man used to hard work, and he moved with an easy confidence despite the brutal conditions. She could see he wore several layers, a vest over a thick flannel shirt over what looked like thermal underwear, but without his coat he had to be cold. His hat was pulled low, snow gathering on its wide brim, and his gloved hands gripped the reins with steady purpose. "Why are you doing this?" Felicity asked after a while, needing to understand what would drive a man to give up his coat and his horse's comfort for a complete stranger. Wade looked up at her again, those striking eyes meeting hers. "My mother always said that we are measured not by what we do when it is easy, but by what we do when it costs us something. Besides, no decent man would leave a woman to freeze to death on the road. What kind of question is that?" "The kind that comes from living in a city where people step over folks who collapse in the street," Felicity said with more bitterness than she intended. "I once saw a woman faint from hunger outside a bakery, and 3 people walked past her before someone finally helped." "I helped, but I was not the first to see her." "Well, this is not Boston," Wade said, and Felicity realized she must have mentioned her origin earlier, though her memory was still fuzzy. "Out here, we depend on each other. Your neighbor might be 10 miles away, but you help when you can, because someday you will be the one needing help." "Is that why you have a ranch out here? Family land?" Felicity asked, wanting to keep him talking, wanting to stay alert and also to know more about this man who had saved her life. "Bought it 5 years ago with money I saved working cattle drives up from Texas," Wade said. "It is not much, about 200 acres, but it is mine. I run about 50 head of cattle, some horses, do some breaking and training for other ranchers. It is a living, and I am my own man." "Are you married, Mr. Jackson?" The question came out before Felicity could stop it, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the cold. "No, madam. Never found the right woman, I suppose. Or maybe I have been too busy building up the ranch. It takes most of my time." He paused, then asked, "What brings you to Wood River? You mentioned you were on the stagecoach." Felicity hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "I am a mail-order bride. I came to marry Herbert Thompson." Wade's step faltered for just a moment, so brief she almost missed it, then he continued walking. "Herb Thompson. I know him. He is a good man, runs a big operation north of town, lost his first wife to cholera 4 years back." "He mentioned that in his letters," Felicity said quietly. "He has 2 children, I believe, a boy and a girl. Tommy is 9 and Sarah is 7, Wade confirmed. "Good kids. They have been needing a mother's touch, that is for certain. Herb's sister has been helping out, but she has her own family to tend to. Felicity did not miss the slight change in Wade's tone, something she could not quite identify. Disappointment, resignation. But that made no sense. They had only just met, and under dire circumstances at that. Still, she found herself studying the set of his shoulders, the way he leaned into the wind, pushing forward to save her, and something stirred in her chest that had nothing to do with gratitude. "What about you, Miss Kramer? What made you decide to leave Boston and come all the way out here to marry a stranger?" Wade asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice, no judgment. "Necessity, at first," Felicity admitted. "The factory where I worked closed, and I had no family left after my parents died. But also, I wanted something different. I wanted space and sky and a chance to be more than just another factory girl in a tenement." Mr. Thompson's letters were kind. He spoke of the land, of the sunrises, of building something lasting. It appealed to me. "The sunrises out here are something special," Wade agreed. "And sunsets that turn the whole sky pink and gold. You will see once this storm passes." They walked on, and Felicity felt sensation starting to return to her extremities, painful prickling that made her gasp but which she welcomed because it meant she was warming up. Wade heard her sharp intake of breath and looked up with concern. "Are you all right up there?" "Yes, just my hands and feet coming back to life," Felicity said. "It hurts, but I know that is a good sign." "It is. When we get to the ranch, we will warm you up slowly. Cannot do it too fast or it causes more damage," Wade said. "I have some experience with frostbite. Lost a calf to it my first winter here, before I learned how to properly shelter the animals. Never made that mistake again." "You seem very knowledgeable about survival out here," Felicity observed. "You learn quick or you do not last long," Wade said simply. "The land does not forgive ignorance or carelessness, but if you respect it, work with it instead of against it, there is a good life to be had." "Do you ever get lonely?" Felicity asked. "You said your nearest neighbor is 10 miles away." Wade was quiet for a long moment, and Felicity thought perhaps she had overstepped. But then he spoke, his voice thoughtful. "Sometimes, especially during the long winters when the work slows down and there is a lot of time to think. I go into town every couple of weeks, see folks, play cards at the saloon. But yes, there are times when the silence gets heavy. I always thought I would have a family by now, wife and kids, make the ranch something to pass down. But life does not always go according to plan." "No, it certainly does not," Felicity agreed, thinking of how different her life would have been if her parents had lived, if the factory had stayed open, if any number of things had gone differently. The wind picked up even stronger and Wade hunched against it, still pulling the horse steadily forward. Felicity tried to see through the swirling snow, looking for any sign of shelter, but there was only white in every direction. She had no idea how Wade knew where he was going, but he moved with confidence, never hesitating. "How much farther?" she called down to him. "About 2 miles, maybe a bit more," Wade called back. "There is a bend in the road up ahead, and then we follow the tree line. You cannot see it now, but my property borders a creek with cottonwoods along it. Gives good shelter from the north wind. 2 miles. Felicity looked at Wade's back, at the snow gathering on his vest and hat, and worried. He was giving so much to save her, walking through a blizzard without his coat, and she found herself caring deeply about this stranger, this good man who had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not even fully formed. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, wanting to distract him to keep him talking and alert. "What is it like?" Wade's shoulders relaxed a little at the question, and Felicity could hear the warmth in his voice when he answered. "The house is small, just 3 rooms. I built it myself, so it is sturdy. Good stone fireplace that heats the whole place. I have a barn big enough for 6 horses and the milk cow, plus storage for hay and feed. There is a smokehouse, a chicken coop, and a root cellar that stays cool enough to keep things fresh. The land is mostly grazing, but I've got a vegetable garden spot that does pretty well in the summer. And the view, well, you will see when the weather clears. You can see for miles, all the way to the ridge line. It sounds wonderful, Felicity said honestly. You must be very proud. I am, Wade admitted. It is not much compared to some of the big spreads around here, but it is mine. Every fence post, every nail in that house, I put it there with my own hands. There is satisfaction in that. I can imagine, Felicity said softly. She had never owned anything of substance in her life, never had the means to build or create something lasting. The idea of having land, a home, something permanent, was deeply appealing. They rounded a bend in the road, and true to Wade's word, a line of bare trees appeared through the snow, their dark trunks and branches providing a visual marker. Wade adjusted their direction slightly, and Felicity realized they were leaving the road, following a narrower path between the trees. Almost there, Wade said, and she could hear the relief in his voice. Another half-mile. That half-mile seemed to take forever, but finally, through the curtain of snow, Felicity saw a dark shape that resolved into a small house with a barn beside it. Smoke was rising from the chimney, which seemed impossible, but Wade explained as they approached. I built the fireplace with a design that allows it to burn low and slow. If I bank it properly before I leave, it can keep going for hours, sometimes most of a day. Keeps the house from freezing. He led them to the barn first, and the relief of getting out of the wind was immediate. Wade opened the door and guided the horse inside, and Felicity found herself in a dark, warm space that smelled of hay and animals. She could hear soft lowing and the rustle of chickens. Wade lit a lantern that hung by the door, and warm light filled the barn. It was neat and well organized, with 3 horses in stalls who whinnied greetings to Rusty, a brown milk cow who regarded them placidly, and a dozen chickens roosting on perches. "Let me help you down," Wade said, reaching up. Felicity leaned forward and he grasped her waist, lifting her down with the same easy strength he had shown earlier. Her legs buckled when her feet hit the ground, and Wade caught her, holding her steady. "Easy now," he said gently. "You have been sitting too long in the cold. Give it a minute." Felicity held onto his arms, and even through the layers of clothing, she could feel the solid strength of him. He smelled of snow and wool and honest sweat, and standing this close to him, she became suddenly aware that he was a very handsome man, storm-weathered but with good bones, a strong jaw, and those remarkable eyes that watched her with such concern. "I am all right," she managed to say, though her voice came out breathier than she intended. "Thank you for everything. You saved my life." "Just doing what anyone would do," Wade said, but he did not immediately let go of her, making sure she was steady on her feet. When he finally released her, Felicity felt an odd sense of loss. Wade quickly unsaddled Rusty, rubbing the horse down with practiced efficiency and giving him feed and water. He grabbed Felicity's carpet bag and another blanket, then gestured toward the barn door. "The house is just 20 feet from here. Can you make it?" "Yes," Felicity said with more confidence than she felt. But when Wade opened the door and the wind hit her again, she gasped. Wade immediately put his arm around her shoulders, tucking her against his side, and together they pushed through the snow to the house. The warmth when they entered was like a physical embrace. The fireplace was indeed still burning, glowing embers that Wade quickly built up with fresh wood. The single main room was simple but comfortable, with a large fireplace, A sturdy table with 4 chairs, a rocking chair, a small kitchen area with a cast iron stove, and shelves lined with supplies. 2 doors led off the main room, presumably to bedrooms. "Sit here, close to the fire," Wade instructed, guiding Felicity to the rocking chair. He piled more blankets on her, then knelt to carefully remove her boots. Her feet were pale and cold, and he frowned with concern. "Can you feel your toes?" "Some," Felicity said. "They tingle." "That is good." "No blackness, no blisters that I can see. I think you will be fine, but we need to warm you up slowly." He disappeared into one of the back rooms and returned with thick wool socks, which he gently pulled onto her feet. His hands were careful and respectful, and Felicity felt touched by his gentleness. Wade hung up his snow-covered hat and vest, and Felicity saw that his shirt was damp with melted snow. "You need to get into dry clothes," she said with concern. "In a minute. Let me get some coffee going first and some stew heating. You need warm food in you." He moved to the stove, his movements efficient and practiced, and soon Felicity could smell coffee brewing and the rich scent of beef stew warming. While the food heated, Wade did change his shirt, stepping into one of the back rooms and emerging in a dry flannel. He poured coffee for both of them, strong and hot, and Felicity wrapped her hands around the tin cup, grateful for the warmth. "Drink it slow," Wade advised, settling into one of the chairs at the table with his own cup. "Your body has been through a lot." Felicity sipped the coffee and felt warmth spreading through her chest. "This is the best coffee I have ever tasted." Wade smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his face, making him look younger, more open. "I think that is probably the cold and fear talking, but I will take the compliment." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the wind howling outside. Felicity studied the room, noting the careful organization, the cleanliness that spoke of a man who took pride in his home. There were books on one shelf, and a harmonica sitting on the mantel, and a photograph in a frame that showed a woman and man she assumed were his parents. "Your mother and father?" she asked, gesturing to the photograph. Wade glanced at it and nodded. "Taken about 10 years ago, just before they passed within a month of each other. Pneumonia took Ma and Pa. Well, I think he died of a broken heart. They had been married 35 years. "I am sorry for your loss," Felicity said softly. "I know what it is like to lose parents. Mine died 2 years ago, also from illness." "Then you understand," Wade said simply, and their eyes met across the room with shared understanding of that particular grief. Wade rose to check the stew, stirring it and ladling generous portions into 2 bowls. He brought one to Felicity along with a spoon, then returned with his own and settled back at the table. The stew was rich and hearty, filled with tender beef, potatoes, carrots, and onions. Felicity ate slowly, savoring each bite, feeling life and strength flowing back into her body with each swallow. "This is delicious," she said. "Did you make it?" "I did." "You learn to cook when you live alone," Wade said. "It is nothing fancy, but it keeps me fed." "It is wonderful," Felicity insisted. "Better than anything I could get at the boarding house where I lived in Boston." They ate in silence for a while, and Felicity found herself studying Wade again, this man who had given her his horse, his coat, his home, his food. He asked nothing in return, expected nothing, simply helped because it was the right thing to do. It was so different from the transactional nature of every relationship she had known in the city, where everything came with strings attached, where kindness was currency to be traded. "What are you thinking about?" Wade asked, catching her watching him. Felicity felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Just that I have never met anyone quite like you, Mr. Jackson." "Wade, please. I think we can dispense with formalities after I have carried you through a blizzard." Wade, Felicity corrected with a small smile, and you must call me Felicity. Felicity, he repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his rough voice. It is a pretty name. Means happiness, does it not? It does, Felicity confirmed, pleased that he knew. My mother chose it because she said I was born laughing. Were you? Born laughing, so she always told me. I think it might have been an exaggeration, but it made a good story. Wade smiled again, and Felicity felt warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee or stew. They finished their meal, and Wade collected the bowls, washing them in a basin of water he heated on the stove. Felicity tried to rise to help, but Wade waved her back down. You need to rest. Your body has been through a trauma. Just sit and stay warm. But you have done so much already, Felicity protested. And I am not tired, Wade said. Please let me take care of this. Felicity settled back into the rocking chair, watching Wade move around his kitchen with easy competence. The domesticity of the scene struck her. How comfortable it felt to be here, in this warm house with this good man, while a storm raged outside. A thought occurred to her, one that made her chest tighten with anxiety. Wade, when will the storm end? When can I get to Wood River? Wade glanced out the window at the white darkness beyond. Hard to say. Could be tomorrow, could be 3 days. These winter storms can last a while. But do not worry, you are safe here. I have got plenty of supplies. But Mr. Thompson, he will be expecting me. The stage coach was supposed to arrive tomorrow. If the stage does not arrive, Herb will know it is because of the storm. He is not going to blame you for that, Wade said reasonably. And with the roads like they are, even if the storm stops tomorrow, it will take time for them to be passable again. Felicity nodded, but worry gnawed at her. She was supposed to be meeting her future husband, starting her new life, and instead she was stranded in another man's home. It was not proper, even if the circumstances were beyond anyone's control. What would Mr. Thompson think? What would people say? What is it? Wade asked, and she realized he was watching her with concern. It is just, well, it is not exactly proper for me to be here alone with you, Felicity said quietly. I know the circumstances are unusual, but people might talk, and Mr. Thompson might have concerns. Wade's expression hardened slightly. Anyone who would hold this against you is a fool. You nearly died out there. Would they prefer I had left you in the snow to maintain propriety? No, of course not, Felicity said quickly. I am not ungrateful, Wade, truly. I just worry about my reputation, about starting off my new life under a cloud of gossip. Wade's expression softened. I understand, and you are right that people can be small-minded, but Herb Thompson is a reasonable man. He will understand. And if anyone in town has something to say about it, well, they can say it to me. The protective edge in his voice made something flutter in Felicity's stomach. She had never had someone defend her like that, speak of her honor as if it mattered to him personally. Thank you, she said softly. You are very kind. Wade looked away, seeming uncomfortable with the praise. I am just trying to do right. Now you must be exhausted. Why do not you take my room for the night? The bed is comfortable and there are plenty of blankets. I cannot take your bed, Felicity protested. Where would you sleep? I have got a bedroll, and the floor here by the fire is warm. I have slept in worse places, believe me. During roundup, I spend weeks sleeping on the ground. Wade stood and gestured toward one of the doors. Please, I insist. You need proper rest. Felicity was too tired to argue further. Wade retrieved her carpet bag and led her into his bedroom, which was simple but neat. The bed was a sturdy wooden frame with what looked like a comfortable mattress and several thick quilts. There was a dresser, a small table with a basin and pitcher, and a trunk at the foot of the bed. I will give you privacy to change, Wade said. There is water in the pitcher if you want to wash up. Holler if you need anything. He left, closing the door behind him, and Felicity stood in the middle of the room, feeling strange and off balance. She was in a man's bedroom, a man she had met just hours ago, and yet she felt safer here than she had anywhere since leaving Boston. She changed into her nightgown, which was creased from being packed but clean, and washed her face and hands in the cold water from the pitcher. The shock of it helped clear her head. She climbed into Wade's bed, and it smelled like him, that masculine scent of leather and wood smoke and clean sweat. The sheets were cold at first, but her body heat quickly warmed them, and the quilts were heavy and comforting. Felicity lay in the darkness, listening to the storm outside and the quiet movements of Wade in the main room, banking the fire and settling down for the night. She should be thinking about Herbert Thompson, her intended husband, the man she had traveled 2,000 miles to marry. She should be planning what to say when she finally met him, how to explain the delay, how to be the wife he needed. Instead, her thoughts kept returning to gray-blue eyes and strong hands and a rough voice saying, "You fight until you cannot fight anymore." Felicity fell asleep to the sound of wind and the knowledge that in the next room, Wade Jackson was sleeping on the floor to give her comfort, and she dreamed of sunrise over open prairie. She woke to pale light filtering through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon. For a moment, Felicity was disoriented, not recognizing where she was, and then memory flooded back. The storm, Wade, the near-death experience on the road. She sat up quickly, then winced as sore muscles protested. Every part of her body ached, but it was the ache of healing, not injury. Felicity dressed quickly in her spare dress, a simple gray wool that was wrinkled from travel but serviceable. She brushed and pinned her dark hair as best she could without a proper mirror, then opened the door to find Wade at the stove, cooking breakfast. He turned at the sound of the door and smiled. "Good morning. How are you feeling?" "Sore but alive, thanks to you," Felicity said. She went to the window and looked out. Snow was still falling, but lighter now, and she could see the barn and the trees beyond. "Is the storm easing?" "Some," Wade confirmed. "I think it will pass by midday, but the drifts are deep. It will be at least another day before the road to town is passable, maybe two." Felicity felt a confusing mix of disappointment and something that might have been relief. Another day or two here with Wade. It was improper, it was problematic, and yet she could not bring herself to truly regret it. "I am sorry to impose on you further," she said. Wade shook his head firmly. "It is not an imposition. I like the company, truth be told. Gets lonely during these winter months. Now, sit down and have some breakfast." They ate together, bacon and eggs and fresh bread that Wade said he had baked 2 days ago, and talked. Felicity found it surprisingly easy to talk to Wade. He asked about her life in Boston, and she told him about the factory work, the long hours and poor pay, the tiny room she had rented in a boarding house where the walls were so thin she could hear every conversation from the neighboring rooms. She told him about her parents, how her father had been a clerk and her mother a seamstress, how they had worked hard to give her an education, teaching her to read and write and do figures. Wade told her about growing up in Missouri, the youngest of 4 children. His siblings had all moved to California during the gold rush, and he had not heard from them in years. He told her about working cattle drives as a young man, the hard, dangerous work of moving thousands of head of cattle north to the railheads, and how he had saved every penny to buy his land here in Nebraska. "Why Nebraska?" Felicity asked. "Why not go to California with your siblings?" "I wanted land, not gold," Wade said. "And I wanted space. California is getting crowded, or so I hear. Out here there is still room to breathe. The Homestead Act was still in effect when I bought my place, and I added to it with my savings. It is good land, and it will be worth something someday." You are thinking about the future, Felicity observed. Always. That is how you survive out here. You plan ahead, you prepare for hard times, and you build something that will last. They spent the day in the house while the storm slowly blew itself out. Wade taught Felicity to play checkers using a handmade board and pieces, and she taught him a card game her father had loved. They talked about books, discovering they both loved adventure stories, and Wade lent her a copy of 2 Years Before the Mast that she started reading while he went out to tend the animals. When Wade came back from the barn, his coat covered in snow, Felicity had coffee hot and waiting for him, and she felt a surge of satisfaction at the surprised pleasure on his face. "You did not have to do that," he said, but he accepted the cup gratefully. "I want to help," Felicity said. "You have done so much for me. Please, let me at least make myself useful." Wade studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. If you want to help, I would appreciate it. I am not used to having someone to share the work with." They made dinner together, Felicity making biscuits while Wade prepared a rabbit he had caught in one of his traps before the storm. Working side by side in the small kitchen, they developed an easy rhythm, moving around each other with surprising coordination. Felicity found herself hyper-aware of Wade's presence, of the times their hands brushed reaching for the same utensil, of the way he smiled when she told a joke. This was dangerous, she knew. She was promised to another man. She had no right to these feelings that were growing in her chest, this warm affection mixed with something deeper, something that made her heart race when Wade looked at her a certain way. After dinner, they sat by the fire, Wade in the rocking chair and Felicity on the floor, leaning against the wall with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The wind had finally stopped, and the silence felt profound after days of howling storm. "Tell me about Herbert Thompson," Wade said suddenly, and Felicity was surprised by the question. "I do not know much," she admitted. "We exchanged letters for 3 months before I agreed to come. He seems kind in his writing. He told me about his children, about his ranch, about his life. He never made promises he could not keep or said things that seemed too good to be true. It felt honest." "But you do not love him," Wade said, and it was not quite a question. Felicity looked at the fire, watching the flames dance. "I have never met him. How could I love him?" "I hope that affection will grow with time. That is how most marriages work, is it not? Practicality first, and then perhaps something deeper." "Not always," Wade said softly. "My parents loved each other from the day they met, or so Ma always told it. Pa saw her at a church social and said he knew right then she was the one. They were married 3 months later." "That sounds like a fairy tale," Felicity said, trying to keep the wistfulness from her voice. "Maybe, but it was real for them. 35 years of marriage and they were still sweet on each other." Wade paused, then asked, "Do you believe in that? In love at first sight?" Felicity thought about it, thought about the moment she had opened her eyes in the snow to see Wade's face above her, the immediate sense of safety she had felt. "I do not know. I think I might believe in recognition. In meeting someone and feeling like you have known them before, even though you have not." Wade's eyes met hers across the firelight, and the intensity in them made her breath catch. "Yes," he said quietly. "I think I believe in that too." The moment stretched between them, charged with something unspoken, and then Wade looked away, breaking the spell. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow we will see about getting you to town if the roads are clear enough." Felicity nodded, not trusting her voice. She stood, gathered her blanket, and went to Wade's room, closing the door behind her. She leaned against it, her heart pounding, and tried to sort through the tangle of emotions inside her. She was being foolish. Wade was just being kind, helping her because it was the right thing to do. She was reading too much into small moments, creating feelings where there were none. In a day or two, She would go to Wood River, meet Herbert Thompson, and begin her new life as his wife. Wade would return to his solitary existence on his ranch, and they would probably never see each other again. The thought made her chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with her ordeal in the snow. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the sun reflecting off fresh snow in blinding brilliance. Felicity woke to find Wade already up and dressed, standing at the window looking out at the transformed landscape. "It is beautiful," she said, coming to stand beside him. And it was. The world looked pristine and perfect, unmarked snow stretching in all directions, the trees heavy with white, the sky a perfect crystalline blue. "It is," Wade agreed. "I never get tired of mornings like this. Makes all the hardship worth it." They ate breakfast, but the easy companionship of the previous days felt strained, and Felicity knew it was because they were both thinking about what came next. After they cleaned up, Wade saddled Rusty and helped Felicity mount, and they set out for Wood River. The going was slow, the horse breaking through deep drifts in places, but Wade guided them surely along the road. The 5 miles to town took nearly 2 hours, but finally they crested a rise and Felicity could see Wood River spread out in the valley below. A collection of wooden buildings clustered around a main street, smoke rising from dozens of chimneys. "There it is," Wade said, and Felicity could not identify the emotion in his voice. "Your new home." They rode into town, attracting attention from the few people who were out digging through the snow. Wade led them directly to the general store, where a sign proclaimed Thompson's Mercantile and Supply. He helped Felicity down from the horse, and for a moment his hands lingered on her waist, his eyes searching her face. "Felicity, he started to say, but the door to the store burst open and a large man with a full beard and kind eyes emerged. "Good Lord, are you Miss Kramer? We had heard the stage went off the road. We thought, well, we feared the worst." The man, who had to be Herbert Thompson, came down the steps and took Felicity's hands in his own large ones. "Thank God you are all right. When Pete's body was found yesterday, we thought perhaps you had been with him." "I was caught in the storm on the road," Felicity said, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "Mr. Jackson found me and gave me shelter until the storm passed." Herbert turned to Wade, his expression grateful. "Wade, I cannot thank you enough. You saved her life. I am in your debt." "No debt," Wade said, his voice flat. "Just did what anyone would do. Now that she is safe with you, I will be heading back to my ranch. Lots of work to catch up on after being snowed in." "At least come in for coffee and warm up before you go," Herbert urged, but Wade was already mounting Rusty. "I appreciate the offer, but I need to get back. Congratulations to you both." His eyes met Felicity's one last time, and she saw something in them that made her heart break, a longing that matched her own. Then he touched his hat in a brief salute and turned the horse, riding back out of town the way they had come. Felicity watched him go, something screaming inside her to call him back, to tell him, but tell him what? That she had feelings for him after knowing him only 2 days. That the thought of marrying Herbert Thompson made her want to cry, even though he seemed perfectly kind. She remained silent and Wade disappeared around a bend in the road. "Come inside, Miss Kramer," Herbert said gently. "You must be exhausted. My sister is here, and the children are eager to meet you." Felicity allowed herself to be led into the store, which was warm and well-stocked with everything from dry goods to farm equipment. Upstairs was the family residence, a spacious apartment with a sitting room, kitchen, and several bedrooms. A woman in her 30s stood as they entered, and 2 children peeked from behind her skirts. "Miss Kramer, this is my sister Margaret," Herbert said, "and these are my children Tommy and Sarah." The introductions were made, Coffee was poured, and Felicity found herself sitting in a comfortable chair answering questions about her journey, the storm, and her rescue. Herbert and Margaret were both kind and welcoming, and the children seemed sweet if shy. It was everything she had hoped for when she had decided to answer Herbert's advertisement. So why did she feel like she had made a terrible mistake? Over the next few days, Felicity settled into life in Wood River. Herbert suggested they wait a week before marrying, to give her time to adjust and to allow him to make proper arrangements for a small ceremony. Felicity stayed in a room in the apartment, helping Margaret with the children and the household while Herbert ran the store below. Herbert was everything his letters had promised. He was patient, kind, good with his children, and respectful toward Felicity. He made it clear he expected their marriage to be a partnership, that he valued her opinions and wanted her to feel at home. He was also financially stable, the store doing well enough that they lived comfortably. Any woman would be grateful for such an opportunity, but Felicity could not stop thinking about Wade. She found herself staring out the window at the road leading out of town, wondering what he was doing, if he was sitting alone in his small house, if he thought about her. At night, lying in the comfortable bed Herbert had given her, she remembered the scent of Wade's room, the sound of his voice, the way he had looked at her by firelight. She was being ridiculous. She had to stop this foolishness and focus on the life ahead of her. Wade had given her his horse and walked beside because he was a good man, not because he had feelings for her. The intensity she had felt between them was likely one-sided, a product of the dramatic circumstances and her own overactive imagination. A week after arriving in Wood River, Felicity was helping Margaret prepare dinner when Tommy came running up the stairs. "Pa, there is a man downstairs asking for Miss Kramer. He said it is important." Felicity's heart leaped into her throat. She wiped her hands on her apron and followed Herbert downstairs, and there, standing in the store looking uncomfortable in his range clothes among the bolts of fabric and household goods, was Wade Jackson. "Wade," Herbert said with surprise and pleasure. "Good to see you. What brings you to town?" Wade's eyes found Felicity's and held them. "I came to talk to Miss Kramer if she is willing. It is important." "Of course," Herbert said, looking between them with a puzzled expression. "Felicity, why do not you two talk in the back room? You will have privacy there." Felicity nodded, not trusting her voice, and led Wade to the storeroom behind the main shop. Surrounded by crates and barrels, they faced each other, and Felicity waited, her heart pounding so hard she was sure Wade could hear it. "I should not be here," Wade said roughly. "I know that. You are promised to Herb, and he is a good man, and I have no right to interfere. But I cannot stop thinking about you, Felicity. I have tried, God knows I have tried, but every morning I wake up and the house feels empty in a way it never did before. I keep looking up expecting to see you in the rocking chair, or I make coffee and reach for a second cup without thinking. You have been gone a week and it feels like a year." "Wade," Felicity whispered, tears springing to her eyes. "Let me finish, please, because if I do not say this now, I never will," Wade continued, his voice urgent. "I know we only spent 2 days together. I know it is crazy to feel this way about someone you barely know, but I do feel it, Felicity. When I found you in that storm, when I looked down at you, something happened. I felt like I had been looking for you my whole life without knowing it, and these past days without you have been the longest of my life. I am not a rich man. My ranch is small and the work is hard. But I would spend every day of the rest of my life trying to make you happy if you would give me the chance. I am asking you, before you marry Herb, before you make a commitment you cannot break, to consider whether you feel anything for me. Because if you do, even a little, I am asking you to choose me instead." Felicity stared at him, tears streaming down her face now, and her heart felt like it might burst from her chest. "I have thought about nothing but you since I arrived," she said, her voice shaking. "Every day I have told myself I was being foolish, that what I felt was just gratitude or the aftermath of fear. But it is not that, Wade. When you rode away, I felt like a part of me went with you. I have tried to imagine marrying Herbert, building a life here, and all I can think about is you. Your voice, your eyes, the way you gave me your horse and walked beside me through the snow. The way you made me feel safe and seen and valued. I do not want to marry Herbert. I want to marry you." Wade crossed the space between them in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, and Felicity wrapped her arms around his neck and held on tight. They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other, and Felicity felt like she had come home to a place she had never been. "You are sure?" Wade asked against her hair. "Because once we do this, there is no going back. You would be giving up a comfortable life with a prosperous man to live on a small ranch with a struggling cowboy." "I am sure," Felicity said fiercely, pulling back to look up at him. "I would rather struggle with you than live in comfort with anyone else. I choose you, Wade Jackson. I choose you." Wade cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears, and kissed her. It was gentle at first, almost tentative, and then deeper as Felicity responded, pouring all her feelings into the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said simply. "I know it is too soon and I should probably wait to say it, but I love you, Felicity." "I love you too," Felicity said, joy bubbling up inside her like champagne. "I love you so much." They pulled apart reluctantly, knowing what had to come next. Wade took her hand and they walked back into the store together, where Herbert was helping a customer. He looked up as they approached, and Felicity saw understanding dawn on his face. After the customer left, Herbert looked at them both, at their joined hands, and sighed. "I should have seen this coming," he said without bitterness. "The way Wade looked at you when he brought you to town. The way you watched him ride away. I told myself I was imagining things, but I was not, was I? Mr. Thompson, I am so sorry," Felicity began, but Herbert held up a hand. "Call me Herb, please. And you have nothing to apologize for. You cannot control who you love. I am disappointed, I will not lie about that. I had hoped we would make a good match. But I would rather know now than marry you and spend years knowing your heart was elsewhere." He turned to Wade. "You are a good man, Wade Jackson. You will treat her right or you will answer to me, understood?" "Understood," Wade said solemnly. "I will spend every day trying to be worthy of her." Herb nodded, then managed a small smile. "I suppose I will have to start looking for another mail-order bride. The children really do need a mother, and Margaret wants to get back to her own family." "I am sure you will find someone wonderful," Felicity said sincerely. "You are a good man, Herb. You deserve happiness." "So do you," Herb said. "Both of you. Now, I suppose there is a wedding to plan. Unless you are planning to just live in sin, which I would not recommend in a town this size." Wade grinned. "I was thinking we could get married as soon as possible. Tomorrow, if the Reverend is available." "Tomorrow," Felicity agreed, squeezing his hand. "I have already waited long enough." The next day was Sunday, and after the regular service, Reverend Matthews performed a simple ceremony with Margaret, Herb, and his children as witnesses. Felicity wore her best dress and carried a small bouquet of dried flowers that Margaret had arranged. Wade wore a clean shirt and vest, and looked so handsome that Felicity's breath caught when she saw him waiting for her at the front of the church. They spoke their vows with voices steady and sure, and when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Wade kissed Felicity with such tenderness that she felt tears spring to her eyes again, happy tears this time. After the ceremony, Herb hosted a small dinner at his apartment, and it was surprisingly not awkward. The children chattered excitedly. Margaret teased Wade about being a married man, and Herb toasted the happy couple with genuine warmth. By the time Wade and Felicity left town in the late afternoon, Felicity felt like they were leaving behind friends, not scorned acquaintances. The ride to Wade's ranch, their ranch now, took on a different quality than the desperate trek through the storm. The sun was setting as they approached, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold, and Wade pointed out landmarks, telling her about the land, their land. That ridge there, that is the northern boundary, and see those cottonwoods. The creek runs there year-round. In the summer it is the prettiest spot, all green and cool. I thought maybe we could build a bigger house near there someday, when we can afford it. A house with a real kitchen and a parlor and enough bedrooms for a family. How many children are you planning? Felicity asked with a laugh. As many as you are willing to give me, Wade said, grinning. I always wanted a big family, but I will be grateful for whatever we are blessed with. They reached the house as full dark fell, and Wade lit lanterns while Felicity looked around the space with new eyes. This was her home now, hers and Wade's. It was small and simple, but it was theirs. Wade came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. Are you disappointed? I know it is not much. Felicity turned in his arms and cupped his face in her hands. I am not disappointed in the least. This is exactly where I want to be. With you. Wade kissed her, and this time there was no need to pull away, no propriety to maintain. Felicity kissed him back with all the love and desire she had been holding in check, and Wade groaned against her mouth and lifted her into his arms, carrying her toward the bedroom. That night, in the bed that now belonged to both of them, Wade made love to Felicity with a tenderness and passion that left her breathless and amazed. He was gentle with her, mindful that it was her first time, and after, when she lay in his arms listening to his heartbeat under her ear, Felicity felt a contentment so profound it was almost frightening in its intensity. I cannot believe this is real, she whispered into the darkness. A week ago I thought I was going to freeze to death on a snowy road. Now I am married to the man I love. It feels like a dream. It is real, Wade assured her, his hand stroking her hair. And I am going to remind you every single day how real it is and how much I love you. Promise. Felicity asked, tilting her head back to look at him. Promise, Wade said, and kissed her again. And this time the kiss led to more, and Felicity learned that love could be expressed not just in words but in touch and breath and the joining of two bodies and souls. The winter passed in a blur of happiness. Felicity learned the rhythms of ranch life, discovering she had a talent for managing the chickens, and that she enjoyed cooking for someone who appreciated every meal like it was a feast. Wade taught her to ride properly, and by spring she could handle a horse almost as well as he could. They worked side by side, repairing fences and tending animals and preparing for the growing season, and every night they fell into bed exhausted and content. In March, Felicity realized her monthly courses had not come, and when she told Wade, his face lit up with such joy that she laughed and cried at the same time. Their first child, a healthy boy they named William after Wade's father, was born in late October of 1878, delivered by the town doctor with Wade pacing the floor of their bedroom and Margaret, who had come to help, assisting. When Wade finally held his son for the first time, Felicity saw tears streaming down his weather-beaten face, and she knew that this man, who had given her his horse and walked beside her through a blizzard, would be the best father any child could hope for. They had 3 more children over the next 6 years, twin girls they named Rose and Lily, and another boy they called James. The small house became crowded with the chaos and joy of a growing family, and true to his word, Wade began building a larger house near the creek, working on it in between ranch duties. By the time they moved into the new house in 1885, 7 years after that fateful day in the snow, the ranch had grown to 500 acres and they were running over 200 head of cattle. Wade's reputation as a horse trainer brought business from all over the county, and Felicity had started a small vegetable and herb garden that supplied not just their family but several restaurants in Wood River. They were not wealthy, not by any means, but they were comfortable and, more importantly, they were happy. Every evening, after the children were in bed, Wade and Felicity would sit on the porch of their new house and watch the sunset over their land, and Wade would take her hand and tell her he loved her, just as he had promised. Herb Thompson eventually remarried to a widow from Denver who turned out to be a wonderful mother to his children. He and Wade became good friends, often helping each other with cattle drives and harvest work, and Felicity remained close to Margaret, who had become like a sister to her. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Wade took Felicity back to the spot where he had found her in the snow. It was summer now, warm and green, wildflowers blooming in profusion, and nothing like that desperate winter day. But they both remembered, and as they stood there holding hands, Wade turned to her with tears in his eyes. "I think about it sometimes. What would have happened if I had decided to stay home that day, if I had not gone into town to pick up supplies? You would have died out here and I would never have known you existed. The thought terrifies me." "But you did not stay home," Felicity said, squeezing his hand. "You came and you found me and you gave me your horse and walked beside me. You saved me, Wade, not just my life but my whole future. You gave me love and a family and a home. You gave me everything." "You gave me everything too," Wade said softly. "I was just existing before you, going through the motions. You taught me what it means to really live, to love someone so much that their happiness matters more than your own. To build not just a ranch but a life worth living. I am the luckiest man in the world, Felicity Jackson." "We are both lucky," Felicity said, rising on her toes to kiss him. "We found each other against all odds. That has to count for something." "It counts for everything," Wade said, and kissed her back with all the love and passion of their wedding day. They rode back to the ranch together, Wade's arm around Felicity's waist, and when they crested the ridge and saw their house below, smoke rising from the chimney and their children playing in the yard, Felicity felt such overwhelming gratitude that she had to blink back tears. She had left Boston searching for security and a fresh start. What she had found instead was a love so deep and true it had transformed her entire understanding of what was possible. She had found a partner who would walk beside her through any storm, literal or figurative, who valued her not for what she could do for him, but for who she was. And it had all started on a snowy road, when a good man had given her his horse and walked beside her through a blizzard, asking nothing in return except the chance to help. That act of selfless kindness had been the foundation upon which they had built a life together, and Felicity knew that no matter what challenges the future brought, they would face them together, side by side, just as they had from that very first day. The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and celebrations, hardships and triumphs. William grew into a tall, serious boy who loved working with the cattle and showed every sign of inheriting his father's skill with horses. Rose and Lily, who shared their mother's dark hair but their father's striking eyes, were inseparable and full of mischief, always scheming up some adventure. James, the baby, was quiet and thoughtful, preferring books to ranch work, and Felicity treasured the evenings they spent reading together. In 1890, Wade and Felicity celebrated their 12th anniversary with a party at their ranch, inviting neighbors from miles around. The new house, which had expanded several times to accommodate their growing family, was filled with laughter and music. Herb Thompson came with his wife and children, now grown into teenagers. The town doctor and his wife came, as did the reverend who had married them, and dozens of ranchers and townspeople who had become friends over the years. As Felicity looked around at the crowd filling her home, at her children running and playing with the other kids, at Wade standing by the fireplace talking cattle prices with Herb, she felt a wave of contentment so profound it took her breath away. This was what she had dreamed of without knowing it, a life full of love and connection and purpose. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had left and the children were finally asleep, Wade found Felicity on the porch, looking up at the stars. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her and taking her hand. "Just how strange life is," Felicity said. "How one moment, one decision can change everything. If you had decided to wait out the storm instead of going to town that day, if I had not chosen to come west. If any number of tiny things had been different, we would never have met. But we did meet," Wade said firmly. "I do not believe in coincidence, Felicity. I think we were meant to find each other. That storm, as terrible as it was, brought us together. And I would weather 1,000 storms if it meant having you in my life." "You old romantic," Felicity teased, but her voice was thick with emotion. "Only for you," Wade said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing her knuckles. "Always for you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, and Felicity thought about the girl she had been, desperate and afraid, climbing onto that stagecoach in Boston with nothing but hope and determination. She had been looking for security, for a practical arrangement that would ensure her survival. What she had found instead was everything she had never dared to dream of. In 1895, William got married to a farmer's daughter from a neighboring county, and Wade and Felicity became grandparents for the first time when their grandson was born the following year. Watching Wade cradle the infant with the same tenderness he had shown their own children, Felicity fell in love with him all over again. The ranch continued to prosper. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, cattle thieves and market crashes, but through it all they had each other. Wade taught their sons everything he knew about ranching and horse training, while Felicity ensured all the children, including the girls, learned to read and do mathematics. Rose eventually became a schoolteacher in Wood River, while Lily married a doctor and moved to Omaha. James surprised everyone by going to university and becoming a lawyer, though he returned to Nebraska to practice and remained close to the family. As they grew older, Wade's hair turned silver and the lines on his face deepened. But to Felicity, he was as handsome as the day she had first opened her eyes to see him looking down at her in the snow. Her own dark hair showed streaks of gray, and her hands bore the calluses and scars of years of hard work, but Wade still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world. On their 25th anniversary in 1903, Wade took Felicity on a trip to Denver, their first real vacation in all their years of marriage. They stayed in a fancy hotel with electric lights and indoor plumbing, ate at restaurants, and went to the theater. It was exciting and novel, but after 3 days they were both ready to go home. "I miss the ranch," Felicity admitted as their train pulled into Wood River Station. "So did I," Wade said, relief evident in his voice. "All those people and noise. Give me wide open spaces and the sound of wind through grass any day." William met them at the station with the wagon, and as they rode toward the ranch, Felicity leaned against Wade's shoulder and sighed with contentment. They had built something remarkable together, Not just a successful ranch, but a legacy of love and family and hard work. Their children were grown and thriving, their grandchildren were healthy and happy, and they still had each other. The years after that seemed to pass even more quickly. More grandchildren arrived, and Wade and Felicity's house became the center of family gatherings, holidays and birthdays and Sunday dinners, where 3 generations crowded around the big table Wade had built years ago. In 1910, on a summer evening warm and perfect, Wade and Felicity sat on their porch watching the sunset, as they had done thousands of times before. They were both in their 50s now, still healthy and active, but aware that they had more years behind them than ahead. "You have any regrets?" Wade asked suddenly. Felicity turned to look at him in surprise. "Regrets? About what?" "About choosing me over Herb. About giving up the chance to live in town with more comfort and less work. About the hard years when money was tight and we struggled. Any of it." Felicity took his weathered hand in both of hers and looked into those gray-blue eyes that still made her heart skip a beat after 32 years of marriage. "Not one single regret," she said firmly. "Wade Jackson, you are the best decision I ever made. Every moment of our life together, the good and the hard, has been exactly what I wanted. You gave me your horse and walked beside me, and you have been walking beside me ever since. Through storms and sunshine, through poverty and prosperity, through grief and joy. You have been my partner, my lover, my best friend. How could I possibly regret that?" Wade's eyes grew bright with tears. "I love you, Felicity, more now than the day we married, if that is even possible." "It is possible," Felicity said softly, "because I feel the same way. I love you more with every passing year. You are my home, Wade. Not this house, not this land, but you." They kissed as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. And Felicity thought about that scared young woman on a snowy road, freezing and desperate, who had been saved by a cowboy with kind eyes and a generous heart. That woman could never have imagined this life, this love, this beautiful, messy, perfect family they had created together. But she had lived it, every precious moment, and she was grateful beyond words for the chance. Years continued to unfold with the same steady rhythm that had marked their life together. In 1915, Wade and Felicity celebrated their 37th anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even their first great-grandchild, William's grandson. The ranch had been partially turned over to William, who ran the cattle operation with skill and dedication, allowing Wade and Felicity to slow down and enjoy their later years. They still rose early, old habits too ingrained to break, but now their mornings were spent feeding chickens and tending Felicity's extensive garden rather than the hard physical labor of earlier years. Wade still trained horses occasionally, working with young animals that needed gentle handling, and Felicity had become known throughout the county for her preserves and medicinal herb mixtures. On a cold January day in 1918, 40 years after that fateful blizzard, Wade woke Felicity before dawn with a gentle shake. "Come on, get dressed warm," he said, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "I want to show you something." "Wade Jackson, it is freezing outside and we are too old for adventures in the middle of winter," Felicity protested, but she was smiling as she dressed in her warmest clothes. Wade bundled her into the wagon, piling blankets around her, and drove them out along the road, the same road where he had found her 4 decades ago. When they reached the spot, now marked by a small cairn of stones Wade had placed there years ago, he helped her down and they stood together in the pre-dawn darkness. "You remember?" Wade asked softly. "Every detail," Felicity said. "I was so cold I could not feel my fingers. I could barely walk, I thought I was going to die. And then I found you, Wade said. The best thing that ever happened to me lying in a snowdrift. The best thing that ever happened to me was you stopping, Felicity corrected. You did not have to. You could have kept riding, convinced yourself you had not seen anyone. But you stopped, and you gave me everything. They stood in silence as the sun began to rise, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. 40 years ago, this place had been the site of near tragedy. Now it was holy ground, the birthplace of a love that had lasted a lifetime. I wanted to bring you here today because I want you to know something, Wade said, turning to face her and taking both her hands in his. If I had to do it all again, knowing everything that would happen, all the hard times and struggles, I would still stop. I would still give you my horse and walk beside you. Because these 40 years with you have been the greatest blessing of my life. You are the greatest blessing of my life. Felicity felt tears freezing on her cheeks. And you are mine. Every single day I thank God for that storm, as terrible as it was, because it brought me to you. I was looking for security and survival, and I found love and purpose and a life beyond anything I could have imagined. You showed me what it means to be truly loved, Wade. Not for what I could provide or how I could be useful, but just for being me. That is a gift I can never repay. You repay it every day, Wade said. Every morning I wake up and see you beside me. Every meal we share, every sunset we watch, every grandchild who carries on what we have built together. You have given me everything, Felicity. Everything that matters. They kissed there in the rising sun. Two people no longer young but still deeply in love. And then Wade helped Felicity back into the wagon and drove them home to the ranch, to the life they had built together out of nothing but determination and love. In the autumn of 1925, Wade fell ill with pneumonia. Despite Felicity's careful nursing and the doctor's best efforts, he grew weaker, and one evening in late October, he called the family together. They gathered around his bed, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and Wade looked at each of them with love and pride. "You have all made me so proud," he said, his voice weak but steady. "You have taken what your grandmother and I built and made it into something even greater. You are good people, kind people, and that matters more than anything else. Remember that. Be good to each other. Help when you can. Walk beside those who need it." He turned to Felicity, who sat beside him holding his hand, tears streaming down her weathered face. "And you, my beautiful Felicity. My mail-order bride who turned out to be the love of my life. I'm not afraid to go because I know I have lived well. I have loved and been loved. I have built something lasting because of you. It has all been because of you." "I love you," Felicity whispered, leaning close. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I know," Wade said, smiling. "That is what has made everything worthwhile, being loved by you." He closed his eyes then, surrounded by family, and slipped peacefully away. Felicity held his hand until it grew cold, and even then she could not quite bring herself to let go of the man who had saved her life and given her everything. They buried Wade on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the creek and cottonwoods he had loved. The funeral was attended by over 200 people, testament to the impact Wade Jackson had made on everyone who knew him. Felicity stood by the grave as they lowered the casket, supported by her children, and said goodbye to her husband, her partner, her great love. The months after Wade's death were the hardest of Felicity's life. She had known grief before, losing her parents, but this was different. Wade had been part of her for nearly 50 years. She woke reaching for him, made 2 cups of coffee without thinking, turned to share something only to remember he was gone. But she was not alone. Her children and grandchildren rallied around her, making sure she was never isolated, always including her in family gatherings and decisions about the ranch. William moved his family into the main house to keep her company, and gradually, Felicity found a new rhythm to her days. She spent her time with the great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their great-grandfather, about the man who had given her his horse and walked beside her through a blizzard. She told them about building the ranch, about hard winters and drought years, about the love that had sustained them through everything. "He was a hero," the youngest great-grandson asked one day, his eyes wide. Felicity smiled and smoothed his hair. "Yes, he was, but not the way you might think. He was a hero because he was kind when he did not have to be, because he helped someone who needed it, expecting nothing in return, because he lived every day trying to be a good man. That is the best kind of hero, the everyday kind." On a spring morning in 1928, Felicity was working in her garden when she felt a sudden pain in her chest. She sat down on the bench Wade had built for her years ago, overlooking the view they had both loved, and felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. William found her there an hour later, sitting peacefully with a slight smile on her face, gone to join the man she had loved for nearly 50 years. In her lap was a dried flower, one she had kept pressed in her Bible from the bouquet she had carried on their wedding day. They buried Felicity next to Wade on the hill, and at her funeral, her children and grandchildren shared stories of a woman who had crossed a continent looking for security and had found love instead. They spoke of her strength and kindness, her wisdom and humor, the way she had made everyone feel valued and seen. But mostly they talked about the love between Wade and Felicity Jackson, a love that had started on a snowy road and had lasted beyond death itself. It became a legend in the family, passed down through generations, the story of the mail-order bride who was freezing on a snowy road, and the cowboy who gave her his horse and walked beside her, and how that single act of kindness had blossomed into one of the greatest love stories their family would ever know. On the gravestone, William had inscribed their names and dates, and below it, a simple phrase that captured everything. He gave her his horse and walked beside her. She loved him for it all their days. The ranch continued to prosper under the care of their descendants, and the house by the creek remained the center of the family for generations. And every winter when the first snow fell, someone would tell the story again, of Wade and Felicity, and young ones would listen wide-eyed to the tale of love born in a blizzard, of a good man who stopped to help, of a woman who chose love over comfort, and of a life built together one day at a time, one step at a time, walking beside each other through every storm.